Hello, my name is Killian. I work in North Dundalkin Library, one of our branches of South Dublin Libraries, and thank you for joining us this evening for Negotiating Mainstream Life as a Teen Adult with a Hidden Disability with Michael Ryan. Just to let you know in advance of the talk that we are recording the talk, and we are delighted to have you all here today. At the moment, we have a very good crowd, and we hope that you find this talk both informative and helpful. And now I will pass you over to Michael. Sorry, Michael, you're on mute. I'll just have to.
He sounds like Mr. Hickey.
That's grand. Thanks, Killian. Yeah, we always have these few little technical hitches at the start. So thanks for that introduction and welcome everyone to this webinar. Michael Ryan is my name, and I don't know if you just want to hit mute on some of those mics there, Killian, please. You might just have to go through each one individually. That's okay, super. So so this webinar is, I think it built for about an hour, but my sense of it is it might run over a little bit because I have quite a few slides, and but you know, feel free to come and go as you wish. If anyone has kind of booked themselves in for a Christmas party in 10 Downing Street, you might have to leave early and off you go. So I am just going to click through here. So what we're going to cover this evening is, it's quite a range because we're talking about autistic teenagers and autistic adults. So we're going to cover quite a bit of, I suppose, general tips and hints in relation to school years, college life, adulthood, work life, friendships, relationships, and a little bit about anxiety management and some general life hacks. So when we're looking at the school years, and by the way, I have given Killian the PDF of this presentation, so don't feel like you need to screen share or screenshot or take notes or anything like that. I'd suggest maybe just sit back and trust yourself that you'll remember some of the things that come up that's in relation to you or the person in your life. And what Killian is going to do afterwards then is we're going to put the recording up. I think, are we recording this just yet, Killian? You might just check and see.
Yes, it is being recorded already.
It is. That's great. So we can put that up on the website afterwards, and then we can send you out the PDF afterwards. Now, this presentation, it's a little bit of, as they say, death by PowerPoint. So there's quite a bit of text and stuff on it. So I won't go through all of the text as we go through the slides, because there's quite a few slides and quite a bit of detail on them. So you can look through the important bits that relate to your life or the person in your life afterwards. So when we look at the school years, we're talking about a school with a support unit or class. Don't particularly like the word unit there, actually. So we're looking at a support class, maybe an autism class. And then if you see if you can find a school with a good reputation that has good kind of SEN, special education needs coordination facilities, that have the SNAs, counsellors, the accessible supports, resource hours, and that you can get an IEP for the child in school. Before they go to school, my sense is that you should send the reports to an SEN officer at the school so that they can prepare as best they can for the person entering the school so that they know the history. In advance of the year starting, it's always useful. There's so many new things about a school, particularly when they're going into secondary school. And there's a vast difference between primary and secondary schools. So as you can see, the list of all of the kind of new things that might be there. And just check out the school website, because a lot of schools now do a private tour, a video tour of the school in advance, or they'll do them in person. The COVID restrictions have put a little bit of a halt to that. So a lot of schools have a video up on their website. And then I always consider color coding systems for different subjects. So you would have a blue folder with, say, the geography stuff, a red folder with the history stuff, an orange folder for the Irish, and so on and so forth. And then highlight those in on the timetable. But very shortly, the person will realize, and just it'll get kind of hardwired in what color is for what subject. There's for autistic students, there's July provision, particularly in the primary school. So you could look at trying to organize that. And then exemptions, there could be an Irish exemption maybe, and sometimes reduced timetable. Just obviously if there's an exemption, they'd be supervised in, maybe they might do a bit of additional literacy or additional maths, something like that. Very often somebody whose anxiety is too challenging for a full day in school, most schools will offer an option around reduced timetables. Usually in a school then also I suggest that each teenager, say in a secondary school, would have an area for decompression. So if it's a thing that they just need to leave a classroom for a little while to regulate after a bout of anxiety, or after a meltdown, lots of schools will have somewhere like that. It could be like down by the chaplain's place, or a prayer room, or a room outside the counsellor's office. And sometimes it's just, there's usually a seating area outside the principal's office where they can be semi-monitored, but have a chance to just decompress. It'll look like they're getting in trouble quite a bit, because that's mostly the where the guys go who are heading for suspension and all that kind of stuff. But it can be a quiet place too. I would encourage you, if you're involved with the Parents' Council, that the schools do awareness training for all the staff and the teachers. And then for the parent or the student to advise the yearhead on any specific accommodations that each person would need in the secondary schools. A lot of you will be very familiar with this, and some people are just at the start of this kind of process. So this is just kind of a broad overview of different things that might suit different people. So just be patient if all of this is kind of second nature to you. There's some people just kind of starting out on this journey with somebody with autism or with their autistic student. It's always good to request from the school that you get plenty of notice of any changes to schedules, trips, change of teachers, and can't always be for sub teachers on the morning, but where possible, it's good to get advance notice of that. Sometimes the classrooms change, the exams, project deadlines, the curriculum, all of those different elements of school life can change, and as much notice as possible is always good for an autistic student. Well, it's not just an autistic student. I've said autistic student, but we're dealing with all students with hidden disabilities. And most of these accommodations apply to all of the students who have a hidden disability. Very often we would look in the schools too at, and just so you know, I work in a number of schools. I work as a counsellor in schools. I work across a couple of primary schools and secondary schools as well. And so I would very often be working with the autistic students and trying to negotiate some accommodations on their behalf with the school management. So sometimes if homework is just really a nightmare, we sometimes put a cap on the time. So we might say they can do 1 hour of homework, and whatever they can do in that hour, that's it, or 2 hours or 3 hours, depending on where they are in relation to their education. And we'd very often say to the school, let all the teachers know if the student doesn't have much homework or didn't complete the homework or didn't get any of it done, that's okay, that they will have done their scheduled time, and that's all they can do. It's always good to connect in with the school counsellor. Not everybody with a hidden disability needs a school counsellor, but the school counsellor is there for all of the students. And they are good, even if there isn't anything specific going on, but they are good for teaching things like anxiety management and social skills, relaxation techniques, mediation interventions is what I would do a lot, but meditation as well could go in there. Support, advice, and things around change management. The special education needs officer then can coordinate the SNAs, provide skill building. They usually allocate resource teachers to do separate subjects around skill building or social skills or time management or organizational skills, those kind of things, you know. The SEN will also advise parents and students on exemptions, and they can mediate with other staff then in relation to specific accommodations for that student. They also organize the assistive technology and then the exam accommodations. So they might be additional time in a test. Maybe somebody might need a separate center for a test where they would just have one person in the room to supervise them, or it could be a small center. So there could be like 10 people in a room. It's much quieter, there's much less shuffling, desks moving, much less clicking, much less noise, coughing, all of that kind of stuff. So it just depends on the student. Sometimes they need time to just decompress from time to time and walk around. And anyway, there's all of those different kind of accommodations. And then it's good to maybe just let the student know about the structures within the school. So it's very different, particularly in a secondary school from a primary school. And in a primary school, they're used to just dealing with their teacher and then maybe a deputy principal, maybe a resource teacher and the principal. So in the secondary school, you've got a principal, you've got maybe a number of deputy principals, year heads, and then tutors for each year group. So it's good to maybe just outline to the student what those structures are going to be. And I encourage all of the schools to have visual instructions then in relation to directions and maybe what happens in a particular room, which is on the door, because lots of people with hidden disabilities prefer visual clues rather than written instructions. Sometimes we do also look for an exemption in relation to group work options. I do encourage people to try and engage with group work in as much as they can, but if it is a thing that it's just beyond somebody's capacity of anxiety, we look for different options where they can do a project on their own. And then sometimes they have to give a presentation in front of a whole class. And if that literally is just too much for somebody, sometimes the teacher will just allow them to present one-to-one to the teacher if needs be. Sometimes parents would say that they just want their child to go into the school and not mention their hidden disability or visible disability. And I would encourage everyone to become ambassadorial about whatever, I suppose, label they have in life. Now, we know labels are for jars, not for people. But as we also know, unfortunately, we need the label in order to get the service. And rather than maybe attach any shame to it by hiding it, I think we should be ambassadorial about whatever labels we have. Sometimes also people struggle with the common eating spaces, like a large canteen, something like that. So very often, if it is really too much for somebody, I generally ask schools to provide a smaller place where somebody can go and not have all those sensory assaults, I guess, at the canteen area. We mentioned that organization training for student. A study timetable, of course, is always really handy. And again, you should have on the study timetable in the evening breaks built in so that the person knows exactly what's expected of them. Clear instructions for homework, I mentioned that earlier. Well, I mentioned the timing earlier, but for teachers, I would ask them to be very clear about homework, excuse me, and to try and make sure that they give exact instructions for homework. And this is particularly important when teachers are sending home homework in times when schools are on lockdown or something like that. So it's just, again, clarity is always helpful for people with hidden disabilities. I have a slide later on about reporting bullying, so we'll come to that later on. Try and see if in the school there is a buddy or a mentor system available. So very often first years coming in the secondary school system might have a fifth year or a TY person that they can link in with, who will just be able to take them on a tour from a student's point of view and link in with them from time to time, just to make sure that they're not isolated in the school and that they kind of keep up on, I suppose, for want of a better word, the school gossip that teachers probably won't be imparting at tutor time. And it's also really good for a first year to have somebody senior to them that they can kind of lean on from time to time if needs be, and just somebody keeping an eye out for them. Seating arrangements is another thing, whereby some people prefer to sit right up in front of the teacher so that they don't have the distraction of everyone behind. Others prefer to sit over near a window. Others prefer to sit at the back. So again, that's something to be considered when you're talking to their year head. And then parents and students to have scheduled review meetings just to make sure that the school are meeting the needs of the person with a disability, just to make sure all the accommodations are being sought, applied for, or whatever the case may be, and that the school is providing whatever supports they can for the student. Yeah, the dinner system for third level. Then that is the disability access route to education. So as your child is heading towards the 6th year end of, well, probably in 5th year, you'll be starting a DARE application. And that's to look at some colleges will accept somebody with fewer points for some of the courses. And just also it's linking the school into the college in relation to disability services. So if it's a thing that bullying becomes an issue for you in school, first of all, it's not your fault that you're being bullied. What I often do is do a role play with somebody if they're in with me for some counselling. And we would play out the part of what to do, and we'd be asking them to first take it upon themselves to ask the bully to stop, and to let them know that they will be reporting bullying. And once somebody does it in a role play once or twice, it becomes much easier than to do it in real life if they're faced with that situation. So you practice how to tell the bully to stop and to let them know that you will report, put the hand up, look them in the eye and tell them to stop, and report if they don't. On a bus, if nervous, of course, the bus is a challenging place for some people as well. So I suggest if you're nervous, sit near the driver. And then if you do get any grief on the bus, even because very often it will be from somebody in your school, to report that as well. I encourage everyone to keep a record of all incidents, no matter how small they are, because it's that little kind of book of evidence that will help to bring a case along. And then report all incidents to a parent or teacher. And of course, if you're a bystander to bullying, make sure that you report that on for the other person also. So we'll just come to college years. So college life then is the next stage. And I encourage everyone to connect in with the accessibility officer, or sometimes it's called disability support services, and bring the documentation along around your condition. Ensure the college are aware of your diagnosis. And there's usually a welfare officer in the college too, and they are great for emergency things if there's financial issues, mental health issues, physical issues, sexual health issues. So again, it's about looking out for all of the different supports that are available in the college. There's counsellors, there's medical support, disability officers, chaplains, career advice. And I also encourage everyone to attend for the orientation events, because it gives you great insight into all of the different things associated with the college. So again, the college will have a whole series of accommodations like note-taking, study support, scribes, additional time in exams, electronic submissions. Well, most things are submitted electronically now. So, you know, again, they might be able to select seating, and you know, particularly maybe somebody who's hard of hearing might need to sit close so that they can lip read if needs be. Excuse me. And then sometimes you can get, particularly since COVID happened, an awful lot of blended learning, I suppose we're calling it now, or hybrid learning, where the lectures are recorded or beamed out electronically as well as in person. And again, they will have the separate centres, and you know, people can get presentations emailed and all of those things. If one thing, COVID has helped in this matter, because a lot of lecturers are now used to dealing with in the hybrid situation, and that certainly helps anyone who is anxious about going into college. I would also consider spreading the course over additional years, and this has helped a good number of students that I've worked with in the past. Because very often you'll have maybe 6 or so modules in a year, and that can just be too overwhelming for people because you can be doing a number of modules at the same time. And lecturers don't always know of the other lecturers' deadlines. So you could have two deadlines looming all at the same time, and you're trying to study, and you're trying to attend, and you're trying to deal with all the other elements of life. So if it's a 4-year degree course, you may consider stretching it out over 6 years and just taking 4 modules per year instead of 6. And that might just become more manageable. Most courses will have an element of working in groups. And again, I encourage everyone to at least give it a go if you can. And group work can be quite frustrating for a lot of people because not everyone pulls their weight equally. You have to do the social interaction and all of that. For most elements and most things in life, we end up working in groups one way or the other. So if you can get, I suppose, some way comfortable with it in college, it'll stand to you in life. But if not, don't be afraid to let your lecturer know, and they'll be able to let you work on your own. And again, it's about being ambassadorial, about getting what you need to succeed in college, about being honest about what you need and being unapologetic about getting what you need. When you do go and meet with your disability officer, accessible officer, or chaplain, support person, whatever it is, bring a list to the meetings with you to make sure that you get to address everything that you need to address. Where possible, try and keep your appointments. And if you can't make it, please try and give as much notice as possible, because you know they will have other people that maybe they can get in once they have enough notice, but once an appointment comes and goes, it's just the time is gone and they can't get it back. So it's good for you just to keep in with them by giving notice. Just try and be as respectful as you can about those you're connecting with in college. They won't always have the answers every time straight away, but generally people in those jobs are there to get you through the course. So just try and be respectful with them. And procrastination is a favorite hobby of a lot of students. Certainly was when I was one. And you will put off everything until last minute and all that kind of stuff. But then sometimes things, of course, will just climb up on top of you and just you get overwhelmed by it, and you'll end up kind of drowning under the weight of all of your deadlines, all of the assignments, projects to have in, presentations that you'll have to get ready. Apart from all of the other kind of elements of life, you'll have to pay rent and pay bills and do all that kind of stuff, you know. So my sense is don't avoid problems because they don't get solved that way. Deal with issues as they arise and as soon as you can when an issue arises. So, but look, people do understand that sometimes things go wrong and they don't always turn out how we hope they would, but there's always somebody there to help, just not to ignore them, just to deal with stuff as it happens. And again, just see if any lectures are offered online. That's what I was saying earlier. And again, attend the orientation meetings. The campus, generally a college campus seems huge at first, you know, but after a little while you'll learn to navigate it and negotiate it, and there's a lot of new buildings to take into account and rooms within buildings and corridors within buildings and all of that. It'll be awesome at the start, but you know, you do get to know it fairly quick. And like I said before, to try and become an ambassador for your challenges, you know, because other people will benefit from that. And as charming an ambassador as you can be, people will warm to you in that way. And there is an old saying, you attract more bees you attract more flies to the pot with honey than you do with vinegar. And that's just a saying about, if you come at it in a charming way, people will come at it, will come along the journey with you to try and help you as best you can. If you're coming at it in a kind of a spiky way, it can be tricky to bring people along with you. So just try and be a charming ambassador for whatever your hidden disability is. And you may, of course, end up having to educate people about whatever your condition is. And unfortunately, sometimes there's no way around that, but people are generally really, really keen to learn about what challenges you have, because you know, as Adam Harris would say, certainly around autism, if you meet one autistic person, you just meet one autistic person. So everybody is different. Everyone has their own challenges. and everyone has their own needs, you know. So again, being unapologetic about your needs and letting people know what it is that you want. You do have to deal with the people who kind of think they're an expert on whatever you have. So, you know, there might be people who think just because you might have autism that you are just going to be like Sheldon, or they'll have some small little nugget of information about whatever it is that you have, and just try and be patient with them. Try and locate the first aid stations, and just make sure that wherever you go, just from a health and safety point of view, make sure you know the exit routes and evacuation procedures in whatever room you're in the college and in your accommodation. You've got to remember that students are still in the developing stage of their lives. All students, you included, and well, in fact, all of us are constantly in state of development. But they can be very unpredictable, and they don't always stick to the rules, and they're at a stage of life where they are attention seeking, so expect the unexpected. Rag Week is, you know, when colleges are in full flow and everyone is on site. It's an alcohol and drug fueled series of events. So be prepared to roll with the madness, or just avoid college that week, or stick to the library or somewhere that's not going to be caught up in all of this madness. But it's pretty wild, so just be prepared for that. And then, of course, don't be afraid to ask for help from anyone at any time. I always recommend that you have a budget and that you stick to it as best you can, keeping a little stash of 30 to 50 for unexpected requirements, and have an emergency plan if your money runs out. So look, with excuse me, things like Revolut or bank transfers and that kind of stuff, it's quite easy for somebody in your life to transfer money to you if money runs out. It's never been easier, but try and just keep the stash if you can. If you are trying to make friends in college, join the social groups, the sports. There's usually sports, academic, and social. And, you know, whatever faculty you're in college, there will be probably a social element to it, or at least an academic social club attached to it. So consider joining them. At least it will be people who are at least of the same interest as you. We'll come on to friendships a little bit down the line, but at least in those clubs, you will come with a connection to people that are there. And don't forget, of course, to stay connected to your existing and your home supports, whether it's relatives, friends, family, clubs, groups, your faith community, or whatever it is at home. Okay. Personal hygiene, of course, is very important. So clean clothes, especially the contact layer, and clean body every day. Try again, there's a lot of new things in college that you won't have dealt with in school. So there may be, well, your regular clothes that you have to wear, but there may be uniforms attached to whatever faculty you're in. If you're in hotel and catering, maybe, or if you're in engineering, there may be specific equipment and clothing for that, or sportswear, whatever it is. You've got to organize yourself for your own transport, getting yourself to lectures, and there might be a few hours between lectures and they don't all start on the same day. You have to organize your submission of assignments through the Moodle website or whichever website your college uses. There's all kinds of different things that you have to consider, that maybe because you're now independent, you haven't previously had to consider these things. So just give yourself plenty of time around organization. And if you have a medical condition that's likely to cause an incident, don't be afraid to tell others, and have an emergency plan. So I guess I'm talking about things like epilepsy, or if you need an EpiPen or something like that, or, you know, if you're prone to bouts of depression or whatever the case may be, just that people who are in your immediate circle would be aware of what to do in an emergency. And again, it's about being unapologetic about this. This is what you need, and it's good that people around you know what to do. Okay, we look at the adult years. So when we're looking at accommodation tips. And when you're considering accommodation as an adult, I mean, look, you may decide to stay at home and that's perfectly fine. But if you have to move away, there's all kinds of different options. So if you have enough money, of course, you get whatever apartment you like. Although things are tight, you might have to queue up to view these things and all of that kind of stuff. But you might consider, if you like alone time, there are usually kind of what used to be called bed sits, but now they're called studios. Or studio apartments, and that's just for one person with maybe a bed, maybe a separate room. It's usually en suite or a shared bathroom down the corridor. Or you could get a private room in a shared house, and even some people do shared rooms. I think they're even doing shared beds now, but I think shared room is probably as much as you'd probably want to consider. So I would suggest maybe trying a private room on a quiet floor, as it's easier for you to control the sensory stimuli there. Maintain your space clean, tidy and clutter free, because I often think tidy space, tidy mind. It's easier to keep your mind clear if your space is clear. You're going to have to consider cookery skills, because it can be expensive if you just eat takeouts, and of course not always the best nutrition maybe in takeout food. Or if you're just getting it from the local deli, you're going to be limited in the kind of nutritional balance you're going to find there. So it's cheaper and you'll have a better balance in nutrition if you can learn a few cookery skills, and there's tons of stuff on YouTube for you to find that out. Have a basic grocery list and excuse me, make sure to purchase spare items before they run out. And you're going to have to learn about laundry skills also. Well, you can keep putting your money in with, or keep putting your laundry into a laundrette and get them done, but that's quite expensive too. Of course, you can bring them home at weekends and all of that kind of stuff, but it's no harm to learn about laundry. It's a good skill for life, and it's important that we have clean clothes, because that can cause a personal hygiene issue too. And then showering, of course, very important. I recommend you shower daily, and again, after exercise if needs be, and for sure, definitely before a date. So when you're in a shared accommodation, you need to consider that there's chores to be done. So common areas need to be kept clean, like halls, living rooms, gardens, bathroom, toilet, kitchen, all of those kind of things, the bins, shopping, keeping an eye on the fridge. And usually, well, sometimes there's a roster, sometimes people will take on specific chores. You'll have to negotiate that with your own flatmates. Sometimes people love cleaning and that's perfectly fine. Other people love cooking and that's perfectly fine. So you might be lucky to just be in a house where everyone gets to do their own kind of interests, and you'll have to negotiate that as you go along. So try and not be the one in the house that causes people to complain about your noise, your mess, that you don't pay the bills on time, you don't do your chores, or you smell, or you have a bad attitude, or you're selfish or careless. So try not to be that person. There may be a pooled kitty, is what they call it, for common expenses. So that's just a little pot of money that everyone pays into. And sometimes that's for things like that everyone will use, like toilet roll, buttermilk, bread, potatoes, jam, that type of stuff, cleaning products, that kind of thing. And yeah, so just also be aware of your space from a safety and security point of view, and just make sure that you pay your rent, your bills, and the kitty on time. Okay, we're going to look at work life. And excuse me. Sorry about that. I just unmuted there for a second and I didn't realize the security wouldn't let me back in. So we're going to look at work life, and what we need to look at, I suppose, when you're considering the type of work that you want to do, you need to try and think about the kind of people you want to work with, where you want to work, if your work can maybe incorporate your special interest, again, the hours and the shifts. I remember one guy who wouldn't take a job just because he was asked to work 9 to 5 and the hours didn't suit. And when we asked, could he work an 11 to 7 shift because the place was open, it was a retail place, they had no issue with that whatsoever, and he could avoid the rush hour traffic in the morning. So again, you know, maybe it's just about considering what suits you best. You're looking at the salary and obviously the rate of pay. Some contracts are for longer periods of time, maybe it's permanent, part-time, whatever the case may be, and the security of the position. So, you know, getting a Christmas position might leave you out of work again in January. So you'll know yourself what suits you best. And again, the sensory challenges, if it's a really noisy place and that doesn't suit you, that's not going to really work for you. And the pace of work, of course, as well. Some people like a sedentary type of job, others like high-paced action. Again, the uniform, if the type of clothing you have to wear doesn't suit your sensory needs, then that won't be for you. All of those things, I don't need to go through them all, but you've got to consider the kind of environment you want to work in, the kind of job, the kind of people you want to work in, and all of that, indoor, outdoor, and the kind of equipment to be used. So there's a lot of things to consider when you're looking at what job would suit you best. So when you're going for an interview, it's important to do a bit of research on the company and what they do and the size and location and spread and type of business and everything like that. And to try and be as familiar with the job role as possible. And if you know the name of the interviewers, I would try and look up their profiles just to get a sense of what their areas of interest are. And then they would usually recommend that you would turn up in business attire no matter what the job is. And you know that you have obviously freshened up and you practice good personal hygiene. I wouldn't be suggesting you chew gum or have any aftershave or perfume going in. And just maybe go along to somebody the day before dressed in how you intend to present yourself and just see if they think that that is suitable. Make sure you check the route before you go so that you can arrive early. About 10 minutes early is about right. And usually when you went in, when you go in, a receptionist or an administrator will instruct you on what will happen next, and they'll take you to where you need to go. I have shake hands there, but it's probably more about bumping elbows in this day and age, I guess. And if possible, try and smile and just look them in the eye when you are introducing yourself and when you're leaving, if possible. But don't be afraid if eye contact is not something you like to do. Don't be afraid to maybe mention that, and that's okay. People are generally understanding. Excuse me. During the interview, then try and stay focused and answer what you're asked and show interest in what they're saying. And if you don't know the answer, just admit it instead of trying to make something up. If you're asked to tell a little bit about yourself, say where you're from and the relevant qualifications, some brief employment history, and maybe a little vignette of your life, your career philosophy, or you can even mention a hobby. Make sure that you're consistent with your CV, because if what you say doesn't match up with your CV, you're just going to cast doubt over your integrity. Have a couple of questions ready about the operation of the company, but not about conditions, holidays, sick days, or holidays in there twice. And then try to arrange to meet somebody afterwards, just, you know, in a relaxed way to go through the process. And don't worry if you've messed it up, because everyone messes up interviews from time to time. All interview experience is good. And, you know, you can congratulate yourself on the positives and for just getting through it. And again, a firm handshake down at the bottom there, but that might not be too COVID friendly now. So, but you get the message from those pictures there. If you can practice interview skills, there are professional job coaches, but maybe there's a family friend or excuse me, somebody in a position of authority or responsibility that you know who might be used to dealing with interviews. Keep your CV to 1 or max 2 pages. Pick jobs that suit your personality or your skill set. And then some people might prefer self-employment, and there are lots of Elance, freelance websites, Fiverr, lots of those different things where you can stay at home and just bid on jobs, whether they're graphic design jobs or accountancy jobs or something like that. So then in the workplace, don't be afraid to look for reasonable accommodations, because that is the law. You are entitled to reasonable accommodations for your disability. So that could be assistive technology, sensory issues, timings, like I was saying about rosters, how they give instructions and what is expected of you. And then boundaries, checklists, and again, you can ask them for good notice of any changes. And my sense of it is, for all of us, you need to become competent at some specific skill, task, or role, and kind of carve out your niche within whatever industry you go into. It's okay to be a little bit eccentric. Just observe the codes of conduct in your job. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't be afraid to disclose your condition. Because again, you'll be educating others about what your specific needs are, and they will then be able to look out for you on that front. And then with scheduled feedback, I suggest you seek and give solid and frequent scheduled feedback to your employer or your supervisor or whoever you answer to. And then it's always good to try and identify an ally or an advocate in your workplace who can maybe ask on your behalf if needs be, or keep an eye out for you to try and give the heads up to somebody that they could be doing something else to make life a little bit easier for you. Generally, they recommend office romances are not a good idea. Report any bullying incidences. Don't just take it up, don't implode, which means go in on yourself with this. Make sure you report any incidences. There's lots of different ideas, opinions, and things floating around offices. So you've got to respect everyone else's ideas. Be careful not to isolate yourself through overexposing others to your area of special interest. You'd probably be told if you're oversharing in those things. Compare and despair. Don't compare yourself to others. That's not just about the work life. That's about everything in life, really. So you are just yourself, and be unapologetic about that. And look, you need to find the right job that suits you. So if something is not working out, that's okay. Nothing may be wrong with the job and nothing wrong with you. It's just not a good match for what suits you. And so you can always leave and try something else. And of course, it's important that you know what you need to earn before accepting a job, because you've got to be able to balance the books at the end of each month. So if we're looking at giving a presentation or talk, then just a few tips on that. Prepare your speech and stick to the topic. Practice in front of a mirror, and then with a small pretend audience if possible, like your friends, your housemates, your family. And you can record yourself to see and hear how it appears to others. Joining a Toastmasters club is always helpful because they give you lots of tips and hints. Toastmasters is just a club. They're set up all over the world, really, and you can join them and practice giving speeches and that kind of stuff. And it's a very friendly environment. Don't overthink how others will judge you. As the saying goes, what other people think of me is none of my business. Try and make an effort with your appearance if you are doing a presentation, and then just take a few deep breaths just as you're about to deliver. It's lots of oxygen up to the brain. When you stand up first, smile, scan the room, and try and think of some small little funny comment about the situation, weather, venue, hiccups along the way, or some current affair issue. And of course, if you're stuck, say something about Trump or Boris Johnson or something like that. Address the organisers and thank them and everyone for attending, and stick to the script and stick to your allocated time. Okay, we're moving along fairly well. I think we won't get in the hour, but we'll be there or thereabouts. So when we're looking at social life and friendships then, there's a thing called meetup.com. It's probably on a bit of a hiatus at the minute just because of COVID and all that type of stuff, but there's certainly lots of outdoor activities that you could do. And in there, if you don't find the kind of area of interest for yourself, you can start up a meetup group in there. Okay, so anything with a specific interest related social group will, at least when you attend that, you'll have something in common with the other people. And then just if you're looking for ideas, join a class in martial arts, which is always handy to have, or art, music, cooking, coding, exercise, crafts, language, whatever kind of skill you're interested in, there's probably a club or a group. And if you can't find that, excuse me, you could consider volunteering at dog shelter, charity shop, tidy towns, whatever your area of interest is. Say hello and introduce yourself as you bump elbows. Usually is I suppose the thing we do now. If you happen to like somebody in the group. So talk about activities of the group. It's a handy way of just starting conversation because you just talk about whatever is happening in the current environment. And try and use turn taking in the conversation where possible. At the very start, it's probably useful to just try and avoid being the expert on a particular topic because you don't know what their level of knowledge is around the topic and they might feel a little bit intimidated or inferior. And just be respectful of whatever their level of interest and knowledge is. Don't be, don't be shy about asking their views, opinions, and about their interests and experiences. Try and avoid discussions on personal matters, politics, or religion until you've met up quite a few times. And in fact, as a general rule of thumb in regular lives, kind of avoid politics and religion at all times, but certainly until you've met up with somebody a few times. If it's a thing that you have struck up a friendship, it is important then to kind of mark events in their lives, like if they're going for a job or if it was their birthday or something like that, just to kind of send a text of support, wishing them well for an interview or wishing them well in a new job, or even saying you're sorry if somebody close to them has passed away or something like that, Try and share some interesting and funny updates with your friends, like memes and jokes and that kind of thing when you're apart. And if the conversation ever hits a lull, just there are general topics like video games, food, TV programs, Netflix, all of that, sports, music, pets, all of that kind of stuff, that you can just ask them about what their view on a particular singer is or program or something like that. When you're looking at friendships then on safety tips, try and avoid overwhelming your friend with messages, requests or updates. You might be really enthusiastic, but they need their space too. Again, from a safety point of view, try and avoid meeting people outside the group until you get a good feeling of safety and connection to them. Remember too, the friends won't ask for a lot of money or ask you to do big favors unless you've known each other for like a long time, like more than a year. And even then, tread carefully. I'm sure your granny often said to you, neither a borrower nor a lender be. And maybe it's useful to keep that quote in mind. And then look, if you feel mostly bullied, inferior, pressurized to do activities, belittled or vulnerable, this person is not a friend. When we consider then personal relationships, when I show you this list, you probably go, how does any two people ever get together? Because for any relationship to work, all parties have to have at least initial physical or sexual attraction, similar and compatible moral codes, similar attitudes to living standards, similar attitudes to money, finances, value systems, intelligence, maybe aesthetic looks, interests, not similar sense of humor, but compatible senses of humor, I kind of think of them as wavelengths. You know, we don't actually have wavelengths, but I kind of think sometimes you just need, as the saying goes, to be on somebody's wavelength in order to connect. And then kind of compatible life goals, or at least an understanding of each other's life goals, and be willing to offer up time and space and allow them space to fulfill their life goals. And then, you know, Seeger wrote a book some time ago about personal relationships, and he was kind of saying that chatting someone up is not that different to an interview. And he suggests, if where possible, that you try to, don't forget to look at their face for more than 2/3 of the time while listening or speaking, and smile a bit if you can. And if they're doing the same, it means they like you. There's some very basic kind of thing then. If it has to do with private parts, it has to be done in private time, in a private space. And if it involves somebody else, you need their permission or consent, and they must be over the age of consent. And in Ireland, that is 17. So for love to flourish, you need to give and take in the relationship. You need to ask yourself what they would like. Create a culture that is calm, harmonious, and peaceful. And give freely of hugs, kisses, intimacy, gifts, flowers, power, and choices. And if you're dating for a good while, don't forget to tell them regularly that I love you. And I know a lot of people on this webinar now will be going, oh my God, he's talking about me. I need to do these kind of things more regularly too. All of us do, you know. Educate your partner about your condition and how it affects you and what they can expect from you. And again, it's about being unapologetic about what you need. And then try and be sensitive when making comments. You don't always need to point out all your partner's flaws. You don't need to win every argument, debate, or discussion. And as the saying goes, you can choose to be right, or you can choose to be happy. So set a time aside weekly to check in with each other and to be open to hearing how each of you would like to make changes. So I just suggest communicate often, openly, and honestly. And listen to each other and provide feedback with constructive and sensitive responses. So again, communication is probably the thing you'll hear most relationship counselors or most relationship experts talking about. Communication is key. So try and not take each other for granted, you know, so appreciate each other and always say please and thanks, no matter how long you're in a relationship and no matter how small of a request you're making. Make compliments to each other often and encourage each other in your endeavors. And forgive and move on when you've had issues, you know, try not ruminate on past challenges. Be present at each other's significant milestones like graduations, bereavements, illnesses, failures, victories, all of that kind of stuff. It's just important when you look back over the course of your life that they say things like, well, you were always there for me when I needed you, you know. And try and make sure that you get to do things together, find a pleasant hobby that you both enjoy and make sure you do it. Have respect for each other's privacy and space, and fix problems quickly and peacefully. And if needs be, you might need to get help. There are relationship counselors, relationship experts, and all of that kind of stuff. But as the saying goes, try never to go to sleep on an argument. And we're always looking to negotiate to a win-win when making any decision. So we just look at the 5 pillars of wellness from Dr. Rangan Chatterjee. And he has this kind of notion that, you know, once we do these 5 things in life, we keep ourselves right. So he's talking about a balanced nutrition. You know, he kind of has this 5-2 thing where you eat whatever you like 5 days, and then on 2 days you really slim the calorie count down, kind of like fasting, I guess, you know. The second one is about movement for physical exercise. They say about 10,000 steps a day, and you're talking about cardio and resistance. aerobic and resistance. Yeah. Relaxation is the third pillar. Just try and make sure that you give time for yourself, for your hobbies, for reflection, relaxation, meditation, that type of thing. Chai tea and Tai Chi and all of that. It's a good idea to just take time and sit in silence and meditate or listen to a guided meditation. Sleep then is the next pillar. And again, it's about maybe not having screens late at night before you go to, they say for 90 minutes, you should have no tech before bedtime. And the middle one there is about grateful. It's always a really lovely, peaceful way to drift off to sleep is if you can think of a number of things that you're really grateful for that happened in the day, and just try and you'll doze off as you try and think of them. And just maybe one thing that you might have done differently, not a criticism, just something that you may have done differently. And then try and avoid caffeine before you go, so herbal tea, that type of thing. And the final pillar is about community connection. So it's just staying connected to your family, to friends, in a club, volunteering, something like that. So they're the kind of 5 pillars he's talking about. Just the community connection, sleep, nutrition, exercise, and relaxation. Another just good tip that I think particularly now with all of the kind of news that we get and all of the different challenges we have, it's about limiting your exposure to news. We don't need a constant update on numbers and restrictions and figures and hospitalizations and all that kind of stuff. You'll get enough news. It'll find you. You won't miss out if you don't have a constant news feed of what's going on. General life hacks, I'm going to go through these, but actually we've covered quite a few of them in the presentation already. So it's just about, personal hygiene and laundry and all of those kind of things. It's useful to kind of consider what your life's purpose is and go for it. And I saw something recently about the meaning of life. And it was an interesting statement. And it just said, the meaning of life is to find your gift. And the purpose of life is to give it away. And I kind of just loved that as a kind of while we wait to see exactly what the meaning of life is, that will do for now until somebody actually comes up with it. So the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away. Again, just in relation to some social norms, just to kind of remember kind of difference between intimate space, personal space, and kind of social space. We mentioned Meetup, we mentioned Toastmasters, and that was just kind of, just there's lots of different ways to kind of find out cooking skills, you'll get it all there. We mentioned organizing your life, we mentioned turn-taking conversations. Yeah, just as you go through life, maybe, of course, I can only just advise that going the legal route is better than the illegal route. And it's just about, as you consider your life, as you enter into adulthood, you have to make these kind of choices. And just be aware, sometimes the easy option is not the best option. It's useful if you're really not good with money. There is citizens information. They have people who can talk you through budgeting and that type of thing, or MABS, money and budgeting advice services, if you need help with that. And then, again, going back to the compare and despair, don't worry about what other people are doing. If you spend your life trying to be somebody else, who is going to be you? So it's important that you just be your authentic self. And I just like that these 2 words, sometimes people say they feel weird if they do some things kind of eccentric, but weird and wired are made up of the same letters. So I am not weird, I'm just wired differently. There's a number of supports, and again, you get those on the PDF as it comes out, if you want to get that. So what we did actually manage to bring it in just the hour. So what we covered was the school life, college life, early adulthood, interview tips, the workplace, relationships, friendships, general life hacks. I think we've done pretty good in the hour. Some useful apps are Smiling Mind is particularly good for younger people. I think it's out of New Zealand, it's pretty good. Calm is probably the best downloaded app in the world for relaxation. And lots of these have a lot of free elements to them. As you go deeper into the app, maybe there are paid parts of it. There's just a number of supports there that might help with whatever support group that might be of use to you. And again, they'll be on the PDF that Killian can send out. So that's it. Thank you for tuning in tonight. I appreciate North Clondalkin Library inviting me along to give that presentation, and for everyone who came along this evening to tune in. And like I was saying at the start, we'll put the recording up on the website later on. If you have any questions or queries, I know we don't really have much time tonight, but you can reach me on those contact details there. Because I know, I think the mics are all off anyway. But I think sometimes people don't want to ask the question in public, which is fine. So again, thank you everyone for, I'm just going to stop sharing that. Thanks to everyone for coming along tonight, and I hope you got something out of that. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Killian.
Thank you, Michael. That was very informative and helpful. Just so you know, we've had a few messages coming in just to say thank you very much, and that people are very happy with it. So as you said, we'll forward on the PDF and the recording as soon as they are available. But thank you to everyone for attending, and thank you again, Michael.
That's great.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Bye-bye.